Alex. How are you?
A little wet, but okay.
Good. That was such a nice piece in the Post.
It was. It was. They've been working on that for a little while. Very well.
I hate hearing my own voice.
Hi, Mary Beth.
Hi, how are you?
Thanks.
Brush shorts, hot off
Are
the
they
press.
different?
They're heavier paper. And
Okay, well, I'll bring some of the one at the charrettes.
Yeah.
So you can get.
Okay, we're gonna start. All right. Yes, when she's done. Is Bob not coming tonight?
He was late last one.
I need to check. What? Oh, is it?
Unbelievable.
Or it came before it was born.
Yes, it can.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to ANC 3F's July 15th, 2014 meeting at the Methodist Home. I'm Adam Tobe, Chair of ANC 3F. First, we have a quorum here. Everyone is here except for Bob Summerskill. If everyone wants to quickly introduce themselves, starting with Manoli.
Manoli Praniotakis, Commissioner for 3F05.
I'm Sally Gresham, Commissioner for 3F04.
Karen Perry, Vice Chair, ANC 3F02.
Malachi Nugent, I'm the Secretary of ANC 3F06.
Mary Beth Ray, 3F3.
All right, thank you. For those watching at home, apologies for the view. It's not going to move because I forgot the tripod, so it's fixed on us three, I guess. So first up is approval of the agenda. For those in the audience, we removed the resolution about Bread First because they had not applied yet for their liquor license, and then we removed Manoli. What was
There's
one?
speed on Briscoe that was prior to the meeting, so it's not. It doesn't. It looks like you've already done it.
Yeah, I deleted it already. So, and then as circulated on the listserv, we added a motion about UDC's campus plan.
Removed it.
No, it's on this agenda.
Okay.
So that's how it differs from what I circulated to the web. Are there any other additions or deletions to the agenda? Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, passes 6-0-0. First up, do commissioner announcements. We'll start with Manoli and work our way left. If you have an announcement, feel free.
No announces.
I don't have announcements because I know Mary Beth is going to cover the Vision Committee with the charrette and the meet and greet.
I have no announcements.
I have none.
None.
Mary Beth Ray with ANC 3F3. I have 4 announcements. The first is that the Van Ness Vision Committee Streetscape Design Charrette will take place this Saturday, July 19th, from 9 a.m. to noon. And this charrette is led, again, by noted architect and neighbor Travis Price, who is with us in the audience today. And it really builds on the community brainstorming session that we held on March 8th. The focus will be on transforming the intersection of Connecticut and Wyndham and connecting the east and west sides of Connecticut Avenue. A team of architects and landscape designers, including Ken Terzian, who's in the room with us, who are working in the area, along with our new Ward 3 planner, Ryan Hand, will participate. And the session is being generously hosted by the UDC School of Architecture. So you'll hear more about this during Travis Price's presentation. The second announcement is that the next meeting of the Van Ness Vision Committee will take place on Friday, July 25th and we'll hear from Bill McLeod, who's the director of the DuPont Main Street. The meeting will be hosted by Ken Terzian at his office at 21 DuPont Circle. And if you're interested, please see me. The third announcement is that we heard from Tara Morrison at last month's ANC meeting. And we were really excited to see the Washington Post magazine section this Sunday, which was completely dedicated to Rock Creek Park in honor of its 125th birthday. So there's just some great things in here. Marge Racklin, a neighbor, is written up for her birding. Joe Kish is written up, the guy that Commissioner Gresham and I have worked with on some Rock Creek issues, and there's some really fun facts. So I commend this to you.
And Marge Racklin.
Sorry,
Marge Racklin's in it.
I just said that.
Oh, sorry.
And my fourth announcement is, has anybody in the room seen this? It's called Origins. I'm just curious if anybody had seen it. I had never seen it before, and I was so excited. This was actually produced by Wilson High School students in 1974, and it's a history of our neighborhood, including Chevy Chase. The Chevy Chase Circle used to look like this, which I'll pass it around, and there was a cow who lived there. Anyway, this is just an amazing little booklet, and for those of you who are completely devoted to trees, trees were an issue in 1974 too. And there's actually a cartoon in here with people joking about what's happened to all of our trees in Washington. So anyway, it's a perennial issue, so to speak. But I would like to make some copies of this magazine, and if anybody would like a copy, please see me. But in the meantime, I'll circulate it, and feel free to ask me if you'd like a copy.
Has its copyright expired?
Yes. It is not copyrighted. That's all.
All right. Bob, do you have any announcements?
I had DDOT change a sign on Tilden so that there is now one more parking space.
Fantastic.
It pointed both ways, and it should have only been pointing in one direction to address a driveway. But
Thanks. Next up is announcements open forum. If you are in the audience and have some issue or concern to raise that's not otherwise on our agenda, feel free to come up to our big tripod.
It's not there.
That's not there. But
Podium.
there is a microphone on that lectern that you can speak into if anyone has any. Okay. So next up is commissioner updates. We'll start with Manoli and work our way left again. If you have an update, feel free.
Sure. In the 2 meetings ago, we passed a resolution on a no left onto Garrison Street from 36, just right out here, in part because of the issues with traffic. We're in the midst of collecting the signatures for the petition, received a letter from DDOT saying that they had unilaterally decided to review the situation, which is my understanding is obviates the need for the petition, so they've taken it upon themselves of their own volition, which I think is actually a testament to the effectiveness of the resolution. So they're looking at it right now, and if you have any desire to write a letter in favor of it, I recommend sending an email to james.cheeks, CHEEKS, @dc.gov. And also, so the deadline is the 21st of July. The second item is that we'll have a resolution later about student assignment policy, but if you are so inclined to send a comment of your own, the deadline is also July 21st, and I recommend you check the dme.dc.gov website, the Deputy Mayor for Education, for more information on submitting it, but it's the 21st is the deadline on the latest proposal. That's it. I was going to have, something about a historic publication by Wilson High School, but thunder was stolen. So. Sure.
Okay. Sally Gresham, ANC 3 3F04. I'm going to talk on Park Van Ness update, Forest Hills Playground Park update, and Brandywine Street at 32nd Street. First, on the Park Van Ness, continuing excavation and existing building demolition with the HO-RAM, which was not today. Today was the UDC site where people were hearing a pounding noise. It was from the pile driver putting in the geothermal wells, or starting that. I don't know how long that will last. Maybe Adam can give us some more
I
info.
don't, it wasn't quick.
Was it quick?
That's all I remember. It was like,
It was 7 to 9.
It was 2 hours.
10.
I think it's like a couple hours every day for like a week or two. It's not quick.
Okay, that's what I suspected.
Yeah.
So that wasn't Park Van Ness, so they're off the hook on that one. They're doing concrete operations, underground utilities installation at the first floor. The biggest thing is we're getting more pedestrian improvements daily. The crosswalk markings from our May 29th meeting with the community asked for certain things to be done for the pedestrian improvements. The crosswalk markings at Yuma were removed last week, which made for traffic jams, as we all know. Signs at Yuma were changed to specify a no crossing area and where to cross. Both of those were done by Saul. DDOT has recently instigated the LPI, lead pedestrian interval, at Albemarle has been increased from 3 seconds to 5 seconds. And the pedestrian clearance time, the time that the signal flashes don't walk, has been extended by 5 seconds. The motion signal sensors that are forthcoming from Saul subcontractor that says the sidewalk is closed on the east side of Connecticut are supposed to be installed in the next 2 weeks. So we got some action from the May 29th meeting, and that's good news. So hopefully there'll be some more forthcoming. On the Forest Hill Playground update, as you all know, there's been a lot of construction. Everything has been demolished at this point. They are grading and excavating the playground area. They have protected the trees. There was some tree hugging going on for a certain amount of time. There are 4 trees in the site were questioned by the community, and we have allowed those to be taken down after extensive research and what needed to be put in its place. We will be getting new trees for the 14 trees that have been removed, but again, they only come in at 2-inch caliber. So hopefully in 20 years they'll be big again. The new basketball court has been excavated. They are waiting to take down 2 of the trees at Brandywine once they get the no parking signs redone. They tried it one time and it didn't work. All the cars remained on the street and they could not take the trees down. Let's see, we have gotten a new current plan, which is pretty much the plan that is posted on the bulletin board and on the website, but it's a little bit more detail. A lot of people have asked if there's a sandbox, sand table, a spinner, a seesaw. All those items are on the plan. Our task force, Forest Hills Task Force, will be reviewing those plans and get back to anybody if they want further information. The biggest thing is we were able to get the adult fitness equipment that we have been trying to get for about a year. It's made by Compin, and it's going to be a silver color, and it's going to have a cross trainer, free runner, and power bike. It's all the things that the community has asked for. So that's a huge, big shout out to DPR. I have also contacted and been able to get the DGS and DPR maintenance personnel to focus on the rest of the park. They will be starting to clean up the baseball area. We're getting new trash cans. They have offered to fix and paint the iron curtain sculpture that nobody seems to remember that's back in the woodsy area near the slope. They will be clearing the slope area and hopefully doing other improvements that we've asked for. The last announcement is the update, sorry. Brandywine and 32nd Street, I have been working with TOA, DDOT for about a year. They have put in new stop signs, warning stop signs, and they have also put in stop bars. They tell me they are going to put in new crosswalk markings and new ADA ramps. So hopefully that will be done in the near future.
Nice.
No reports.
So I'll give 3 quick updates. So first, sort of an announcement / update. ANC petitions are available at the Board of Elections, so if you want to run to join, sit up here, feel free to pick up a petition. Secondly, as you may remember, at a previous meeting, we had voted to hire an administrative helper person. So we'll be advertising that job this week, hopefully with the goal of having them for our September meeting. So that's the goal. So if you know anyone that's looking for a part-time job and is interested in DC politics, email me. And then lastly, at the last meeting, we had raised an issue with the Northwest Neighbors grant and wanted to ask the auditor whether it was acceptable or not. The auditor unfortunately said it was not, so we are working on getting that reviewed and changed. So hopefully in the very near future we can approve that grant. That is all. Maliki.
Nothing.
Forest Hills Playground grant? Is that in that
Could
list?
do that.
No announcement.
Bob?
I have one real quick comment, other than to say that I have questions about the judgment of the DC auditor. But the other is to say that following up from the Clean Team presentation the other day, made a query about extending this far up Connecticut, up to Connecticut, Nebraska, and they have said yes, and they're going to add it to the FY15. So in October, the FY15 program, and it will actually extend all the way up to Chevy Chase Circle,
Wow.
as featured in Origins. So that was a success.
That's great.
That was
Congratulations.
published by Wilson, I didn't realize.
Where was it published?
Wilson High School.
All right. Next up, Damian Jones from the Burke School. He's the new head of the Burke School. He just wanted to stop by, say hello. Maybe he'll tell us what's going on at the Burke School these days.
So thank you for giving me the time to come and say hello. Yes,
Welcome.
I am the new head of school at Burke. My first day was July the 1st, so I don't know a whole lot about what's going on. I've been spending the weeks and days trying to familiarize myself with the parents, with the students, and with the faculty members. And certainly it's important for me to do the same with the neighborhood. As I figure out the school, it's important for me to get a feel for how we fit in the community. So my hope is to be present for meetings like this, to contribute when I can as it relates to the business of what we're doing at Burke, and to hear about the goings-on in Van Ness and in the surrounding areas. So thank you for the time. I'm glad to be here.
Thanks.
Thanks. Okay,
I
question?
have one thing for him.
Anyone have
Before
a
you go.
question?
I just wanted to make sure you were aware that the Burke School has a BZA order, and to read that, because that involves the neighborhood
Yes, ma'am.
and the going on.
Understood. I'll do that. Thank you so much.
Bob?
Yes.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say that as we work on the Van Ness corridor and try to make it a more vibrant place, I would really like to invite the Burke bands to play, in some community opportunities. We're not sure what those are going to look like yet or where, but there's actually an amphitheater over by UDC. It's part of the UDC campus. And so I thought it would be fun to sort of partner with the Burke School and with Levine School of Music and maybe some of the other schools in the area and do something musical. So
Great.
just
Thank
wanted
you
to
for the
plant that
invitation.
seed.
That's great.
I represent the single-member district that includes Burke. There are a couple of parking spaces on Upshur that during school hours, Monday through Friday, are no parking. And the theory was that it's safer for the students not to have cars there. It is my thought that the parked cars are not a danger to anybody, and in fact, they help protect the students or any other pedestrians from moving cars. So at some point, I'd like you to review that and whether that's actually a good use for that space to have no parking there during school hours, or whether it's in fact safer to have parked cars, or to otherwise get some use out of the space that benefits everybody, rain garden or something to that effect.
You said Upshur, you mean Upton.
Upton, excuse me, Upton, not Upshur. Upshur's a whole different street.
Is it, and I'm new to this, so please correct me if I'm operating out of order, but if I were interested in finding time with you so that you could actually point out the matters of concern and so we could talk about the thoughts and ideas while we're standing on the block, is it possible for me to get in touch with you so that we can do that?
I'd be happy to talk to you. I have a card for you.
Great, thank you so much.
Does anyone in the audience have a question for Burke? All right. Well, thank you very much for stopping by.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Next up, grant application vote for Rock Creek Conservancy. So, Alex, you want to come on up? So I guess at the last meeting, we had asked you to make some revisions to this. Maybe could you just tell us quickly what revisions you made?
Of course. I've provided more detail about the expenses. I've provided more detail about the total cost. And we've broken down the expenses by items. We're asking for 33% of the cost of those expenses, so 2 weeks of work out of the 6 weeks that the crew will be operating. And those 2 weeks will be the 2 weeks that they spend in the boundaries of ANC 3F. So.
Great.
I don't think you want to use the word operating.
Providing a
word
public
ban.
benefit to the boundaries
To a
of
majority
ANC.
of our residents.
Okay.
Don't forget that.
Did any commissioners have any other questions about the grant?
No, I'd like to move it if we can.
Just before we move it, because you raised the question, I did inquire with the auditor, and I have not received a response. So as far as I know, it's okay.
I call for the question.
Just
Before
letting
they
you
write you
know
back.
that I took your comment seriously.
Okay. All right, so a motion to approve this grant. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Manoli. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
700 passes unanimously. Congrats.
And if I could just provide one other comment, and both Sally and Mary Beth asked last time about soapstone. Though it's not part of this particular effort, I've been out with DDOE twice now in the last month, and we've been removing invasive species in soapstone.
Well,
Good,
thank you.
thank you.
That's great.
Great.
Good, appreciate it.
So it is not being ignored, but it's a big park, so we're trying to cover a lot of ground.
Thanks, Ellen.
Thank you. And I think you saw the article in the Post,
Yes.
the magazine?
Now, two of our
And the
board
map,
members
yeah.
were featured in it.
Yeah.
Doug Barker and Cliff Granville. So that was a wonderful article. Thanks.
Great. Nice.
Don't leave without the check.
So next up, Van Ness Vision Committee request for funding of the Wyndham Hub drawings. So I'll turn it over to Mary Beth.
Okay, great. Thank you. As many of you know, the Van Ness Vision Committee of ANC 3F formed in April of 2013. So we've been going for just a little bit over 1 year. Our committee of 4 ANC commissioners, Commissioner Gresham, Perry, Tope, and myself, along with 12 members of our community, including Ken Terzian and Marlene Berlin, David Bardeen. Anybody else I'm forgetting in the audience? Yeah. And our
Travis.
advisor, Travis
Travis.
Price, who you'll hear more from in just a minute, has met at least once per month, in some cases more than that. We've generated numerous ideas to make our Van Ness Connecticut Avenue corridor more beautiful and more vibrant. We focus on what makes our neighborhood unique: our access to Rock Creek Park, our embassies, and our intellectual community. We've worked closely with the DC Office of Planning, the University of the District of Columbia, American University, Fannie Mae, commercial property owners including Doug Jamal, Arnie Pollinger, B.F. Saul, and the owners of Calvert Woodley. Noted architect and neighbor Travis Price joined our committee as an advisor, and he brought a whole new way of looking at our neighborhood. Like the DC Office of Planning study from 2011, Travis focused on the Wyndham Connecticut Avenue intersection as a potential hub, a beautiful and inviting third place that bridges the east and west sides of the avenue, offers activities for all ages, and highlights the metaphors of trees, water, and rocks. Travis hosted our commercial property owners meet and greet on February 20th. He led the community design charrette at WAMU on March 8th, which was an exciting and dynamic effort to generate ideas to revitalize our public space. He will lead the charrette, the streetscape design charrette, this Saturday, July 19th, to translate our ideas into something buildable. Now it's time to take this effort to the next level. We have many ideas and words, but what we need is pictures. Tonight, we believe that we're bringing an idea that is truly meaningful and will help transform our neighborhood. The 16 members of the Van Ness Vision Committee unanimously support this effort. The design takes into account both practical considerations and the hopes of our community. In short, it will be both visionary and truly buildable. Right, Travis? The Vision Site Design Plan and renderings will help complete our Van Ness Vision Committee mission and will serve as a catalyst for future work with the DC Office of Planning, owners and developers on retail and public space to enhance our community. The design process is iterative, and the fee anticipates input and variations. So what I'd like to do now is make a motion and then introduce Travis, unless,
Sure.
Is that okay?
Sounds good.
So my motion is to use, I move to use $10,000 of ANC funds to commission a design for the Wyndham Connecticut Avenue hub to continue the work of the Van Ness Vision Committee. This design consulting fee to the Spirit of Place, Spirit of Design, which is a 501c3, includes a $2,500 retainer. So that's not $2,500 extra. That's included in the $10,000. The cost includes a real, buildable, conceptual design and renderings for the Wyndham Connecticut Avenue hub.
Seconded by Sally. So, questions, discussion, would you like to invite?
What I'd like to do is invite Travis
Okay.
to speak to what he plans to do and
Sure.
then entertain questions.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Hi, everybody.
Wow.
Travis.
It's a pleasure to be here. I brought a few toys to show you. So I think Mary Beth summarized everything perfectly clearly. It's been really exciting for me living in a relatively visionary house to be a part of this group. It's just been fantastic that everybody's finally, it's come to life, you know, that there's just enough commercial activity, upgrades from the university and both universities. And so all that I brought tonight was my brain and a little bit of hunger to get this moving to a point. So we've cut all the costs down to, these are largely just expenses. My time will still be very strongly dedicated to the committee, I should say. And really looking forward to this weekend, which we keep saying streetscape, but it really is about using the hub as the hub of a bigger idea that might procreate its way down the street with lots of brilliant other designers. But I think we want to do something that gives us a true identity and special. What Mary Beth asked me to do is to sort of say what the product is, and essentially all the think time is still going to be me and pieces of my staff, but the actual project or the product is largely a fairly significantly realistic plan, but something that will hopefully blow your socks off. And at the same time, really render that to the point as when I used to work, I worked on Osei Shalom Synagogue years ago. Rabbi Fink always said, build it and they will come. And I always used to say, build a model and they will fund. And that, I think that's really our next big effort. So I brought copies, just something that for you guys to pass around. These are typical renderings because you wanted me to show what it might be like. These are just really what we call cheap prints from my office today of current renderings we've got going on from residential. You'll see Joe Booth's house in there.
You didn't put in those little boxes that you're doing in Brooklyn, are you? The housing.
Oh, you're right about that.
I sure
Well,
did.
It's going to be interesting. You'll see a lot more about it next week. It's, sorry folks, but it's the first sea container.
They're container apartments.
Oh,
Yeah, they're going to be really cool. If you go on the web, you'll see.
Is that the same as prefab? Or is it a little bit different?
Well, I was called Roman brick prefab, but it's yeah, essentially. But it's there's 750,000 sea containers sitting in America wasting. So we're launching this way to save them, save students money, and bill. These are just fun renderings.
What
is
this?
that one?
Yeah,
That's
it's-
the,
Manoli wants to know if it's the dome going over the Intelsat building.
No, actually, I can show off my pet projects right now. That's a Hare Krishna temple in Potomac. The other is a house on Davenport that's done now, but so you can judge the value. And also in there is a site plan, similar sorts of drawings. And what else did I printed you guys all a copy of the one-page piece that Mary Beth read. But if you look at this, for instance, this would be a 10,000 square foot, very large house. That's the quality of rendering. I mean, people walk into our office a lot of times and they look at things like this, sorry folks, and they say, when did you build it? One of the beauties of computer renderings is these days, and these are about 6 years old. Or this house was featured in Home and Design recently, but this is a rendering. This is there's a level of realism you can't detect anymore, and it puts us more on the spot actually, because it really does look like it's going to look. And we'll throw in lots of bells and whistles with it too. I think we have some new ways of actually augmenting it into video format very quickly and making a little 60-second Tumblr thing will go on the web. But I think the real idea is to show people what it is. It's going to be reiterative. Once the stuff is built in, we can start to shift and change it a little more readily. And then it becomes part of our big marketing package. You really have to send it later. That's all. I don't know what else you would want to ask. But.
let me just say, because I'm sure somebody's going to ask this. I asked Travis if he would break out the hourly, how the hourly rate works and how that time is divided. And so if you could just go through that and maybe just, kind of recap the value that we're getting as compared to.
We can sort of prorate it. I mean, in architectural world, you have hourly rates for each level. This is sort of a levelized dollar per hour. And part of this will be getting deeper into what we already know, but validating the code and zoning. There's actual design time where we're going to go back and forth building the model and actually getting feedback from people in the committee. And then it's just really a lot of time rendering. Getting these things built is like building them with like hand models. It takes time. And that's really all it is. After that, the product is digital. So we can make it as big or small as we want, at least super high res. And we can also use that, I think, as a banner to feed everything else we're going to do. So I just broke those hours down, and then luckily we've taken this through the nonprofit that I have had for years, which is dedicated just to this sort of thing: design, communities, education, the spirit of place, which is kind of an Uber theme I have over historic and everything else. It just sort of reflects on what's going on with people in their community.
Great.
Proud to say I just finished a big one in Ireland. I was gone for, I don't know, 3 weeks, but
Tough assignment.
huh?
Tough assignment going to Ireland.
Well, it was the West Coast too. Yeah.
Great. Do any commissioners have questions?
Wait a minute, he's got one more thing.
Oh, he's got more.
More toys. Sorry, I'll keep. This is a.
Bring your whole office.
That's a rendering.
Oh, cool.
Well, you asked for it. I usually overload, so.
Bob?
In terms of the mechanics of the payments, I need a specific bill for every check. So in terms of a retainer, can you allocate certain hours to that, or is that already done?
No, he did it like this.
I can do that. I can-
With the retainer against the final bill. I don't know.
Yeah, but I'd say the auditor gets a little fussy if we don't have a specific receipt for a specific bill or for a specific check. So if we can get a specific bill, statement that I can give to the auditor and say, we're paying against this, then it works. But I
Yeah,
can't just give you a check that will be part of a larger something eventually.
I was headed to the movies. All right, yeah, that's fine. I know
Okay.
what to do. I know how to break out those hours to a specific amount. Thank you.
Okay, that's fine. As long as there's something specific, I can
Yeah,
write
we
a
can-
specific check to.
And we could put
Which
your
one,
bookkeeper on the phone
25%
with
of
Bob.
it or something?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll know which hours go to it and label.
I think that you guys can work it out.
Unfortunately, I do this for a living, so.
And you've worked with ANCs before, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question.
Mallory?
This is really impressive, and it's amazing that this is done on a computer and that these aren't actual photographs of real buildings. Help me understand what exactly the final product will be. Is it going to be a picture of what you or the committee imagine the street will look like at the end of this process, or will it be actual plans, with specifics? Here's how we changed this, here's how we changed that. Is it an
Border
artist
joints to be
conception?
quarter inch. No, it's really, where there's 3 phases in most architectural design. Is usually conceptual phase, and then there's what you might be referring to at the other end, which are construction documents. That's loaded down to the millimeter. And then there's administering the contract. Those latter 2 are not even remotely there. Now, it's very hard for any good firm to not think about those details and maybe even show some of them when you're doing concepts like this. It's not the napkin anymore. It's very much based in reality, but the product itself is really meant to be reiterative later. We'll target something that we know we can go out and raise funds for, but you would see, say, 1 to 2 or 3 renderings. You would see a plan for sure, and probably a section across the street, for instance. And it would be so realistic that it's to scale. But we're not going to be talking about the mortar joints or things like that, but enough to know, okay, we can go with this, and then you would slowly, as you progress into funding, go into further detail.
When you say enough to know we could go with this, does that mean you would know that this is something that the city would approve or could approve? Or, will you work with the city and?
Right, you might
In this
be
process?
seeking some variances, you might not. We tend to try not to, if we can do it by right, just because everybody's life's easier. But you would know that it could be built. It could be built for an approximated budget. And then who knows where we go for funding. It might be city, it might be a lot of options.
So the final product will be something that we know can be built for an approximate budget within sort of the realm of possibility, given what we
Yeah, and
know
it'll
about
be
the
more
city.
than your typical urban streetscape, which can tend to be plants and, steps and stones and a few benches and the sorts of things that are tastefully reasonable and not so uninspired or inspired. They don't really, it's not like Barcelona where every street, every tile, every street is tiled differently, you know, based on different designers. But this will be something where we think it's going to really be the center of the community. And that's not just aesthetically. I think from the meetings we had, it's functionally, lots of activities ought to be starting there. And we'll be spending a lot of time, I know I will just regardless of this, with Calvert Liquor and with everybody that owns properties and seeing if we can actually promote what they ought to be doing around the hub as well. We know that some development will come there one day. Maybe we can, by code, stimulate that by laying in that kind of density. Because you really have to plan this so that if it happens in a year or in 5 or 10 years, that other things will come to it. So it really has to sort of hug into the future. So we'll probably, that we're going to throw into it because we need that as almost like we need community input to give us the material we need. So.
And can I just
Yeah.
piggyback on that? When we met with Ryan Hand the other day, who's our new Ward 3 planner, we mentioned this project, and he was so excited about it. And he said, wow, if I have the rendering from Travis, then that will be our vision. Then I, as Office of Planning, can take this to the next level and start, you know, hiring consultants to have construction drawings made. So I think it's an effective
Very
and
interesting
fruitful
investment from the community
progression.
point of view. Yeah, because normally you go through a whole other process for a much larger scale. And we just all know in our gut instincts that hub is we've got to center the 3 or 4 blocks to make it, to bring the bookends together. You know.
We've also got the park, which we're also,
Right. I mean,
yeah, I mean,
going all
which
the way
has
into
been our
this,
biggest-
our portal to
yeah.
Soapstone right there,
Right.
and how are we going to deal with that conflict? If you see the slides we brought, it's like all you see there are signs: "Don't park, don't stop."
Right, yeah.
At the park edge, you know,
Yeah.
and it's ironic. Environmentally, it might sound good from one side, but from the other, it's not. But I think that the group we had when we had our first charrette was so informative. So many people came, and I think we got a really good taste of what people want. Now we're going to roll up our hands this Saturday.
start drawing.
I don't have any questions.
Do you have questions?
I would say it's a great focus.
No, I think it's an appropriate use of AC.
Does anyone in the audience have a question for Travis?
Do you want to know what color it's going to make you?
David's coming.
Mr. Chairman, I'm David Bardeen. I'm a member of the Van Ness Vision Committee that the ANC appointed. And I just want to say orally and to the public in this room and who watches on streaming television what I said in an email to you, Mr. Chairman, and to all the members of the commission. You appointed the Van Ness Vision Committee, and you gave us as our chair Commissioner Ray, who has been a remarkable leader, ability and conscientiousness, and she's led us very close to finishing up the assignment that this ANC gave to the committee. And the conclusion that the chair, Commissioner Ray, brought to the committee was that in addition to words, in addition to black and white type diagrams, in order to do the job of conveying to the ANC, to the community, to the outside government agencies and non-government, that we need the kind of visualization, rendering is apparently the professional name for it, that will tell the story, stretch the imagination, that this area, you know, of concrete and asphalt and buildings and trees at one end and trees in an auditorium and an amphitheater at the other end can really be something remarkably different. So this isn't getting, as Commissioner Nugent's questions brought out, we're not at a stage where the committee or Architect Price are going to recommend exactly what to do. There's a long way to go. There's a long way of discussion. People will play with this and do it. But it seems to me, as a former commissioner, as one of your constituents, as a taxpayer, member of the public, this is an excellent use of public resources. So I support the motion that Commissioner Ray has made to spend $10,000 of the ANC resources for this. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, David. Does anyone else in the audience wish to speak? Okay. So the motion was made and seconded, so we'll bring it to a vote. All in favor of the $10,000 for this, raise your hand, say aye. Passes unanimously, 7-0-0. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing y'all soon.
Thank you,
When
Travis.
are we
Thank you
going to
so
get more
much.
about those container apartments?
The trailer, I promised
Container.
that we would not use sea containers crossing. It could be.
Oh, they got them at the Navy Yard. We can do them there.
No, he's done some great houses in our neighborhood.
Come down as west.
No, it's down there. I think.
Yes. All right, so next up
We've
is
got a west, I know.
resolution in
Wait,
support.
We have a question.
What?
Travis, what's the timeline roughly? We forgot to,
Soon after this meeting,
Right.
Saturday, probably within 4 to 6 weeks.
okay.
Great.
Is that okay?
All right, so next is resolution in support of a stop sign at the exit of the alley behind the 5,000 block of Connecticut Avenue where it meets Nebraska Avenue with associated traffic safety measures. So I'll turn it over to Manoli.
Thank you, Chairman Tope. So this is another in a series of traffic and pedestrian-related issues that have been raising in recent meetings. Responsive to requests from residents, this one in particular is an issue with people who live on Nebraska Avenue. For full disclosure, I will include myself in that category, but also people coming from further afield as well and using Nebraska. The issue is the confluence, and unfortunately I had a really great presentation I did. I do have a photo that is illustrative. Unfortunately I forgot my computer because it was raining. I didn't want to bring it in the rain, so I apologize for that. But the situation is such that when people walking down Nebraska Avenue from Connecticut Avenue are passing by the alley behind the block where Politics of Prose and Common Ping Pong are, you have a very difficult situation there for drivers and pedestrians. The combination of the bus shelter and tree and then retaining wall for the office building that's faces Nebraska Avenue, that's at the corner of Connecticut and Nebraska, makes it very difficult for drivers coming out of the alley to see pedestrians coming down Nebraska Avenue. And also, they pull into the crosswalk as it is because of the tree and the bus shelter. It's difficult to see cars coming down Nebraska as well. It becomes even more difficult when a bus actually stops at the shelter. In particular, you also have cars coming going westbound on Nebraska looking to turn left into the alley. That just twice this week I've almost been hit, and I hear regularly from families walking kids to merge that this has become a problem at that. Well, it's always been a problem, but it's it's looking to actually do something about it now. So what I'm proposing, and I've been in touch with several of the business owners on the on that commercial strip, and nobody's raised an issue with an addition of a stop sign before the bus shelter. Before the sidewalk. So not after the sidewalk, but before the sidewalk, so that drivers coming out of that out of the alley are aware to stop before crossing over. One of the other things, because of all that's an issue there, is because of the shelter, because of the tree. They are also looking that direction more prominently than they are people coming up the block. So they don't see the people coming down the street, and then they don't look for the people coming up the street. And it's a dangerous situation all the way around. All you have to do is add a little bit of rain, and everybody's in trouble. The recommendation, or the request, is to call for DDOT to install a stop sign that is a public thoroughfare, that alley, and also for DDOT and WMATA to investigate the placement of the shelter, because that is actually problematic in a number of ways, as I mentioned, but also you get people coming over Connecticut on Nebraska, and traffic merges into a single lane there with the bus shelter when there's a bus, but also even outside of those hours, it's a challenge because of outside of rush hour, the parking is permitted just south of the or just east of the alley. So the recommendation is to investigate the movement of the bus shelter further down the block, further east on Nebraska, or possibly for removal. I know that there are standards for shelters. What I'm asking for is for them to assess the location, whether or not it's feasible to move it down the block. The upside or the downside was that there would potentially be some lost parking spaces, but the right in front of, east of the entrance to the alley is a Pepco station, so there's no residents actually in that spot. So if it's there, then it's not in front of a resident. It's not in front of residents' parking spaces. But that would be for further study. So with that, I have a motion to I have a motion to pass this resolution.
Great. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Bob, by hand gesture. Is there any questions from Manoli or discussion on the resolution from commissioners?
I have one.
Yep.
I'm a little confused on this bus shelter. Where is it now? What's it in front of?
It's in front of the retaining wall that is, and again, I can show you a picture on my phone that unfortunately was on the
The
presentation.
reason I'm asking, I'm not good with east and west and north and south of.
So you know where the
Pennsylvania.
entrance to the alley on Nebraska Avenue is?
Yeah.
So
How far is it?
it's right there. It's on the Connecticut side of the entrance to the alley.
If you're coming out of the alley, it's to the left.
It's to your left.
And how
Coming
far
out of
up?
the alley.
How far up?
It's roughly 10 feet.
Okay. So
I
we
think
can
I
go,
paced it.
we can go to the west more.
It could go to the east.
East.
It couldn't. I don't think it can go further to the west because that I think it's too close to Connecticut Avenue. It would need to go on the other side of the alley.
On the other side of the alley.
Okay. Because I'm always leery of removing bus shelters for people who use the bus.
But this is a good example of how drivers pull directly into the sidewalk because they cannot see around
Yeah.
No, I know,
around the
now that I
shelter.
see where it is, yeah.
Are you,
The real, another solution which I hesitate to raise here, and I'm not looking to push this, but ultimately it may need to investigate a right turn only out of that alley as well. And that's long been discussed, but I think that's something that we need to do more consultation with business owners and with the community on that. That is probably another solution that will need to occur as well. At least be investigated.
I have a friendly request on, be it for the resolved request at DDOT and WMATA. I have been dealing with WMATA and DDOT on a bus shelter on Connecticut Avenue and in my SMD, and they have, WMATA has been very clear to me that I have to go to DDOT for any relocation, that they don't get really involved in that. It mainly is a DDOT because it's on their right of way. WMATA will usually bend to whatever they say. They don't really care about the location.
As long
So,
as the advertising revenue is there.
I guess, but that's what they've told me. So I don't know if you want to kind of couch that differently.
You know, that's very different than what UDC has told us at meetings
Yeah.
about the removal of, the change of a WMATA bus stop.
Right.
In conjunction with
I
their-
went to Ann Chisholm to.
I would like to leave it in.
DDOT
I mean, I
pumps
would
it
just
back and forth, so that's why I
talk to them
was
both.
keeping.
You know,
keep
I
both
don't
of
think it
them.
hurts to have both in.
That's fine. I was just
Yeah.
wanting to know that they're the ones that relocate.
Okay.
They might, but they also consult with WMATA in some cases, because that's what they did with UDC, when we had to
Could-
move the bus
could
stop.
be. Are there any other questions from commissioners or comments?
It's generally safer to have a bus stop after a street, so the similar thing would apply for an alley. So you may just want to bring up some safety issues as well. It doesn't have to. Don't bother changing the resolution, but that's something to bring up.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Does anyone in the audience have questions or comments about this? Okay. Let's vote on this. All in favor of this resolution, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. 700 passes unanimously. Okay, next up is the resolution regarding the June 2014 draft student assignment policy proposal. So I'll turn it over to Malik.
Okay. So as I think you're all aware, there's been a long process of reviewing student assignment and boundaries for the DC public school system. The advisory committee, created by the Deputy Mayor for Education, has released its latest draft. These aren't the final recommendations, but the current draft of its recommendations for changes in student assignments and boundaries. So what we've done here is gone through and commented on each of the main recommendations in that draft. And so I'll just go through and read each of them. We're proposing to support the committee's recommendation to retain the existing DCPS policy on school attendance zone. That means that students will have by right access to the school in their area based on geographic location. That's the way it is now. We're supporting the recommendation to keep it that way. Establish middle school and high school attendance zones according to the proposed geographic feeder pathways. What that essentially means is that the schools in our ANC will continue to feed to Deal, which will continue to feed to Wilson. So there's no change for us there. Provide by right access to PK3 and PK4 programs in zone DCPS schools for children in Title I zones, and lottery access for students in non-Title I zones. Now, Title I has to do with at-risk students and number of students at or close to the poverty level. It doesn't really affect the students in this area as much. So the students in Murch and Hearst would be non-Title I zone school in a non-Title I zone school, so they would have lottery access to those preschool programs. That's the way it is now. Improve public transit services and affordability for public school families. That has to do with subsidies to high school students who would travel on Metro, and also some students, younger students who would take the bus. Craft student transfer policies that minimize the movement of students during school. That has to do with students who have discipline problems who might be moved out of a school for some reason. These last ones are not issues that we heard raised in our ANC. I didn't hear. I don't know, Manoli, if you heard from anybody on any of those.
On the last one, no.
Student transfer policies for disciplinary cases.
No, where it becomes I can talk about it a little bit in the discussion.
We support the recommendation to phase in these proposed changes according to a timetable that's described. Basically, it says it would not go into effect until the 15-16 school year, and there would be grandfathering provisions for families with students already in the system or in school. And then ensure that DCPS plans for and reassesses on a regular basis the programmatic and space needs at individual school and community levels. And then urges the committee to highlight the need for special coordination among the schools in close proximity, such as Murch, Hearst, Jenny, and Lafayette. So the schools in our area, given how close the schools are, it makes sense then for the committee to think of them sort of as a unit on things like facilities and programmatic planning. So those are the things that those are the recommendations that we would support, and that's based on the conversations that we've had with constituents. Manoli and I hosted a community meeting, which was sparsely attended but vigorously debated. Then, be it further resolved that we oppose the committee's recommendations. There are three of these here. First, to set aside 10% of the seats in zoned elementary schools for out-of-zone students. given persistent concerns about overall capacity and walkability of local schools. So that's the system now. There's a set aside for a certain amount of out-of-zone students, but it's not clear how it's measured at a school like Murch, whether they're counting 10% of the current enrollment, which at Murch is much greater than the official capacity of the school. And so we would like them to clarify whether the 10% is going to be counted against the current enrollment of the school or the current capacity of the school. Obviously, we prefer that it be the capacity of the school to help keep over enrollment to a minimum. The second one that we would oppose is requiring selective schools to pair with or convert to a non-specialized school when necessary to address insufficient capacity. And this has to do with the 6 specialized high schools, and there are some elementary schools that have specialized programs as well within the system. And the idea is, if necessary, those would be converted back to normal non-specialized schools. We heard from some constituents who have kids at schools like the School Without Walls who say that that's not a good fix for capacity problems. These schools have been created for a specific reason. They're highly valued. If the problem is lack of capacity in the system, then the solution is to build more capacity. And then the last one is we oppose the committee's recommendation to adjust the Hearst Elementary School boundary northward from where it is now at Yuma Street up to Albemarle Street. For families not currently grandfathered in. There are still some families in that two-block area who don't have children in the system yet. They have infants and toddlers, so they wouldn't be grandfathered. And they feel very strongly that they moved into a community that is a Murch community, not a Hearst community, not least because between those blocks and Hearst, there is UDC, there are the embassies, there's the Intel set. There's a lot of geography between them and Hearst that tends to focus that part of the neighborhood northward towards Murch. They feel part of the Murch community, and they'd like to stay part of the Murch community. And then the last two are just calls for some clarifications in the recommendations. So, Manolo, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, I'd just like to speak when we get moving into the discussion.
Is there a second for this motion? All right, second by Sally. All right, so discussion.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Commissioner Nugent for a fine job on the resolution, and I was glad to contribute to it. And I also want to thank him for co-hosting the meeting that we had here. As he said, it was sparsely, well, it was pretty good attendance, but it was a very interesting discussion, and we, as always, need to thank ANC 3E Chair Matt Fruman, who's also the rep on the advisory committee that developed the proposals, because he really has made himself available twice to our community at these meetings. So there's been plenty of opportunity to come and learn more about what's happening. And it is a fundamental issue where people send their children to school that has profound influence on communities. And this one has been a hotly contested and heated process, including the last meeting at Tacoma Park, or Tacoma Element, what is it called? Education Campus, where they discussed the Wilson community. There's some very strong language that's been used to talk about how the boundaries are going to be done, but I would emphasize, I would recommend everybody, if you haven't had an opportunity yet, hopefully fellow commissioners have, to look at the proposal. And you may ask, some of the elements in the resolution are very detailed. These issues about defining 10%, the 30%. But if you look through the proposal, it is quite remarkable in the level of detail along these lines that it gets into. It also is surprising, I think, because a lot of people had already come to some conclusions that the committee was going to make, and I think it was a surprise that there were some of the more concerning elements in the early draft when they provided these 3 possible scenarios, and as it always was, never going to be A, B, or C. It was going to be elements from different pieces of them, especially for citywide lotteries. And I think people felt that was a non-starter, And as it turns out, some of those more, I don't know if the right word is extreme, but concerning elements didn't make it into the proposal. There are also, I think, some very surprising recommendations on how they shaped some of the boundaries, but especially some of the areas immediately west of the park, or excuse me, immediately east of the park in Wilson and Deal. But some of that has direct implications for the idea of nesting boundaries within boundaries, and that's to some extent how some of that happened. And there are still some that'll shake out. We'll see. You know, we're proposing to continue to grandfather people in the areas that would be rezoned to Hearst. There are some larger issues further south, and not to minimize that, but there are some issues, especially around Stoddard and Hyde-Addison. So it's not a done deal that the boundaries are as they are presented. But I was pleased to contribute to the resolution. I think it's a good statement of a number of positions, and ideally we'll be able to pass this tonight and have it submitted in time for the 21st of July, which is the deadline for comment. So that I yield back.
Have any questions or comments?
I've read the proposal.
I guess I'm just questioning why we're not doing what some other ANCs are doing, and that's saying that this should be delayed until after the elections in November.
Can I respond to that?
Anybody.
So
I mean,
there's a British phrase, that cricket phrase. You play every ball in its merits. What we have before us right now is this proposal. The politics of the mayoral election are, I think, irrelevant at this point as this proposal on the table. I think if you want to play it out, the candidates maybe are rethinking some of the things that they said early on. There is also a challenge on timing. So there's a question about whether or not, how a year is defined and how a school year is defined. So some of these things from the hearing on the 26th were an issue about whether or not they've met there's a clause that says that parents need to have a sufficient, a school year's notice. So before anything goes into place. So in theory, the rush is then to get this out, to get something completed that meets that criteria. I think Councilmember Catania is arguing that if you're not signing something on August 22nd, then that year is not met sufficiently. But then there's another argument that the fact that we're having this discussion now is notice that something is going to happen. That's yet to play out, and I don't think that's really anything beyond our control. I think any ANC that is choosing to do that is acting foolishly.
Right. There is a deadline to get comments in by July 21st. So what we'd like to do is submit comments. We've had some meetings with the constituents, submit those comments by the 21st, and then continue the process as it goes on.
All right, so I guess I'm generally personally okay with most of this. The only one I question us taking a position or opposition on is this adjustment of the boundaries. I guess my initial thought looking at the map of the boundaries got to change somehow, so this doesn't seem inherently unreasonable. Looking at it, so I'm curious, have you considered proposing some new boundaries that we would support? I would imagine that people in Cleveland Park on Porter Street might actually want to go to Hearst since it feeds to Deal and Wilson instead of Hardy. I bet there's a lot of people that might want that feeder pattern. And at the same time, I see someone actually woke up and thought about stuff, and I guess they kind of put that new building is now clearly in Hearst, so that's someone realized that there'll probably be 100 or 200 kids living in BF Saul building at some point. Who knows? Who knows how many kids will be there?
Maybe 10.
10? No, it'll be more than that.
It'll be more than
But
Yeah.
I mean, have we thought about supporting those changes east of Connecticut Avenue at all that are on this new map? So I guess those are my questions.
That we did have that conversation during the community meeting, and if you look at the map, which you have on the screen there, it's actually, there's a switch, flip, where an area to the east of Connecticut, which
Oh,
was
is that
part
what
of
it is?
Hearst,
Okay,
now goes to Merch,
Okay.
and an equivalent area in terms of size on the west side of Connecticut goes from Merch to Hearst. Now, the difference is there are currently more families with school-age children on the west side of Connecticut than on the east side. So it looks like an even swap in terms of geography, but it's not necessarily an even swap in terms of school-age children. So you're moving more kids from Merch, which is overpopulated, to Hearst, which is not overpopulated at the moment. But the fact remains that the people who would be moved don't want to go, and there are no kids on the other side yet, so there's nobody arguing in the other direction. We're only hearing arguments in one direction there. So,
So I mean, I guess, do we want to propose something so when the next draft comes out, they don't do like last time and just move it up again?
Ignore it.
Or ignore it, or just do it? Because, I mean, boundaries aren't fixed in time forever. I
Right.
mean, when I was a kid, my school boundary changes in elementary school. It is what it is. It happens. But I don't know, based on, you know, we oppose this, so what's the, I don't even know what they would do next besides either ignore us or, I don't know, cut some piece of Jenny off,
Well-
I guess. I don't know.
Well, I'd highlight element 38. I'm sure you jumped right to, oh yeah, that's right, element 38 of the student assignment policy proposal. It says DCPS should prioritize a study to add capacity or shrink boundaries of a zone school if the DCPS school has been utilized at 90% or more, has an in-boundary percentage of enrollment greater than 75% for 3 years, and then work with the school and community evaluate specific boundary population, blah, blah, blah. So the answer is to study it further. So it's actually Merch is called out. Janney, Merch, Stoddard, Lafayette, Key are all in this in Ward 3, and then Lafayette's in Ward 4 are called out. So this is going to go through further study. You know, the site improvement team, school improvement team for Merch is still ongoing. Right now, we'll meet again tomorrow. The plan is an 800 student school, which is remarkable for an elementary school. It'd be 800 students. Part of the problem is, you know, when they built the schools, they didn't think enough to make them exactly equidistant from each other, because people are also looking at the walkability piece as well. Obviously, you know, given where population is, that doesn't actually make sense. But what's going to happen is that there's going to be further intensive study, because Merch is at more than 90% utilization for the school-age population, and the in-boundary percentage is above 85%, and it's really going to stay high for the foreseeable future. So it's a long way of saying there's going to be more study.
So they can,
Could we support more study to the boundaries?
I mean, these boundaries,
Because-
if you look at them, once you change one, you've got to start working on the others.
I mean, I agree.
It's a difficult question.
Zoning, so, or, not zoning, but district.
Could we,
Well, anyway, I'm just throwing it
I'm
out
just
there.
throwing
That's
it-
the only part I'm not really
Adam,
comfortable with.
under the therefore be it resolved on things we support,
Yeah.
why can't we add something that we want to see further study?
On the boundaries?
On the boundary-
For our
yeah.
adjoining,
Yeah,
for,
I mean, why can't we just write
Lafayette,
something in right
Janney,
In
there?
Hearst,
acknowledgement of
Eaton,
item
Mann.
38 of the
Whatever.
current draft of the plan, we recommend further study before making any adjustments to the current
Yeah.
merger or something like that.
or
I don't know.
but somehow you've got to bring the others' boundaries in.
So I mean,
I mean, you've
look,
gotta
so
bring the
they
other-
oppose it, then someone else opposes it, and then eventually someone's just gonna make a decision, which just magically
Eaton,
happens.
Stoddard.
So I mean,
But I just think it doesn't hurt us to put in that we'd like to see further study.
You can do that.
I don't think it hurts.
You can add, and urge the committee to study further
Yeah,
the question of boundaries with an eye towards overcapacity and
Yeah,
in
whatever.
recognition of,
I think you
what
have-
is it, item 38 is
Whatever.
that what it's called?
18?
no, I think Manoli said 38.
38.
38.
Of course, doesn't everybody know all this? 38 on page 9.
There's,
We just have-
there's something of a joke in that every research report includes the phrase, "more study is needed." So,
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it ever hurts to add it.
Yeah, okay, I'll work that in.
It is worth pointing out, though, that the boundaries were shifted. They actually did change Merch a bit in that they shifted part of the north end to Lafayette. And I think that was to some extent to compensate for the movement, so that the boundary at the southern end didn't move as
Right.
far north as it initially did.
And as I understand, that's
But
not
they're
our
in 3/4
ANC,
years,
but as
so-
I understand it, that was not as strongly opposed as it has been for the people in the South.
Yeah.
So it is,
That's true.
it is true that it may be possible to find ways to shift boundaries that don't upset the residents in that area quite as much as the residents were affected by this particular proposal. But I take your point that required a little bit more study. And that was part of their strategy, I think, to put something out there and see what the reaction is, and that's the only way they could really get any sense of what the ground truth really is. Put it out there, see who complains and who doesn't. And this is one particular area in our ANC that did complain quite a bit.
Can you list these other schools, the boundaries that are, not just say a study it? I mean, because I think it's going to affect, because when our son was at Merch, it affected, they went through a boundary change also, and there were boundary changes within Man, Key, I mean, all of them had to adjust accordingly. It wasn't just in a vacuum.
No, but we're
Well,
just
yeah,
asking
I mean,
them to
it's-
study it. We're not making a recommendation.
Yeah, I'm not,
We're just asking for
whatever
the
they
study.
do, if it's a Stoddard, I don't know that I care, actually. But I don't, but
Well,
yeah.
I'll add a clause here and I'll send it around.
Okay.
Okay.
Can we add anything in about Merch overcrowding in this at all? Or is it not
What do you
appropriate?
want to
Yeah, I don't think it's.
The council acted, otherwise I would have proposed that we urge the council to override the mayor's veto of the budget.
Yeah,
But they did already, so we don't have to do that.
okay.
do you have comments, questions?
One other thing, on the one that says adjust the Hearst Elementary School boundary for families not currently grandfathered, how do you know who's grandfathered currently versus
It's
what's going to be
it's
happening?
spelled out in
Oh, it is?
excruciating detail.
Okay, I just wanted to ask.
Okay.
Basically, if you have a student in the DCPS system by the 15-16 school year, then you're
Then they're
grandfathered.
grandfathered, okay.
And that was something that we called for in our resolution, and everybody was calling for the grandfathering to be spelled out in detail. And to
No, I
their,
just
to their
haven't read that
credit,
thing, so.
to their credit, they really did that.
Mm-hmm.
Although some people, as we pointed out, are still unhappy with the level of grandfathering.
Okay. Does anyone in the audience have a comment about this?
Somebody at the back. Marlene. I just saw it, another body.
I was afraid you were leaving.
I'm Marlene Berlin. I have a question, what's Hearst's position on this? Since we are representing, and this ANC represents both schools, Hearst and Merch, does anybody have a sense of how they feel about the boundary changes?
I mean, I think they're welcoming to new families that wish to attend Hearst.
Pretty much.
It's going to be a
Yeah.
brand new school.
They would
but,
like
I
to.
mean,
We,
the reality is, it's, there's not a lot of in-boundary students. Frankly, I think in every house in the current boundary, there aren't even enough human bodies to fill the school anyway.
Yeah,
So something's going to change. It's,
So even if
I don't know.
so I can give you the song and dance on that. So Hearst has 50% utilization rate for in-boundary elementary school children. So even if they went to 100%, there'd still be room for 225 out-of-boundary students. The school's being built to 325. The number of school-age children in the Hearst catchment is 101. So there's like 49 or something like that. So their attitude has been come one, come all. Yeah, it's been fairly flexible. That said, they've had some strong comments from some members of the community as individuals, not so much from the school itself, about some of the policies related to the 30% set-asides. And there's some concerns because a school like Hearst that is taking kids on lottery in, that until you hit the 30%, then if those kids sort of cycle through the school and leave after 5th grade, that your numbers are out of whack again. So then the next class is dominated by at-risk kids, and it turns out it was like 45% of elementary school kids in the district qualify as at-risk kids. It creates some management issues for the school. So that's been where their primary, that's what we've heard mostly about their areas of concern, is about those set-asides, and less so about the boundaries. I mean, they said, look, it's a great school. It was pretty upfront with merged families. Look, your property value is not going to plummet because you've been redistricted from merged to Hearst, which is literally what we've heard. And they say, look, just wait. When the renovations are done, it's going to be stunning, and you're going to love to come here. So I think it's been a good, healthy dialogue between the schools and with us.
And we have included representatives from Hearst in all of the meetings. We shared this resolution with them as well ahead of time. So we've tried to incorporate those views as well. But honestly, the more vocal comments have come from upset merged parents rather than satisfied Hearst parents.
Or future merge.
Or future merged parents. That's right.
Okay.
Have they considered Hearst to be a special school like Worcester, being bilingual, or being a...
Referred you to specialized programs, the section on
Okay, I didn't read
specialized
that.
programs.
But, I mean, clearly, that could be a school.
It could be.
Yeah. I mean,
Could.
it doesn't seem like
Or
anything is...
your next mayor just says, I'm moving the boundaries so the numbers work. It's probably more likely.
Yeah, but it could
That's
become
really
a
what's
school
gonna
without
happen.
walls. I mean, think about it.
I don't think it
Yeah,
needs
but
to be.
you know what? It's not a conversation
It doesn't
for
matter
tonight.
for this resolution, but I would assume your mayor in the future, whoever it is, will magically fix all this numbers
Yeah.
using the magic.
Magic.
Okay, so given this, let's vote on this resolution. All in favor of resolution as modified by my comment, say aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously, 7-0-0. Next up, I'm making a motion to clarify the UDC campus plan. UDC's attorneys and UDC approached me. Basically, they're thinking about renting an apartment building outside the ward to use as a dorm. Their lawyers raised an issue saying that one of the conditions in the campus plan could be read to limit them from renting outside of Van Ness area, which I don't actually understand how one could read it as such, but their lawyers are advising UDC that it could be read that way. And basically that is that this is what it says in the campus plan. The university shall be permitted to lease additional units in other buildings up to a total of no more than 100 units within a mile of Van Ness campus. The university shall provide at least one RA for every 8 units. So basically, what UDC wants to do is go to the zoning administrator, who is the person that interprets the zoning orders and the campus plan, and basically say, hey, look, UDC thinks this says we can rent in Petworth, for instance, and the ANC, who spent lots of time on the campus plan, agrees. So my motion is to send a letter to the zoning administrator basically saying, look, the ANC remembers all this negotiation of this limit.
We're like Petridge Farm.
What?
We're like Petridge Farms. We remember.
We remember. And that this was not intended to limit them from renting in Petworth or wherever, anywhere but here, basically. So that is my motion. Is there a second?
Seconded.
All right, is there any discussion from commissioners?
So I just want to be clear that we're supporting an argument against a position that nobody is making except for UDC's lawyers about themselves.
Correct.
I'm all for it.
Yes, it's,
I just find it very strange, because if you read the wording,
I don't read it this way.
I don't either.
I don't see.
Yeah,
I just feel like there's something missing from UDC's end.
This is all about restricting close into campus, but there's nothing about further
Yeah,
out.
that's
I don't
why
know.
I'm not sure we should even send anything. UDC's not here. I would rather see something from Matt LeGrand asking us our interpretation versus UDC, because nobody from the community has raised it.
Well,
I
mean,
mean, UDC requested,
We've
asked
got-
me to help them get his interpretation.
We
I
might
don't
as
see an
well
issue,
approve.
because
I think
if
this
this
is a
makes dorms disappear
straightforward way.
entirely,
I mean, I want to see them out of my
I
building,
think,
so I mean,
and
it's
people
fine
out
with
of your
me.
building, I think it's a win-win for everyone.
It doesn't get them out of your building.
vote yes.
No, but it will if they build the dorm. That's one of the conditions.
Or take
They
over,
have-
or if they build the dorm, yes, but that's
Yeah,
not part of
then they have
this.
to be out within one semester.
Yeah. So, any other questions, comments? Anyone in the audience? Okay, raise your hand if you're in favor of this motion to send this letter.
Aye.
All right, passes 7-0-0. All right. Next up, Manoli is going to introduce a resolution in support of a sidewalk on 36th Street between Garrison and Fessenden Street.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Tope. So this is another traffic and pedestrian safety resolution. The location for this site, and again, multimedia presentation, I would be able to demonstrate it, but we could also look really hard out the windows and we could see it. It's just right across the street. That it's a limited stretch of 36 between Garrison Street and Fessenden Street. What I'm proposing is a resolution that argues that the lack of sidewalk on any part of 36th Street creates hazardous conditions for pedestrians attempting to reach the commercial area on the 5,000 block Connecticut Avenue, or to the Merch School. I'm realizing now I can probably add Deal and Wilson as well, which I shall do, make a friendly amendment to myself. Also Fort Reno Park and the transit stops on Connecticut Avenue, that given all of these measures, all of these issues, that it meets the criteria of Title IX, Section 425.01, as established in the Priority Sidewalk Assurance Act of 2010 for prioritization, that is not undergoing any major construction, sorry about that, major construction, lacks sidewalks on either side of the street, is in a school area, provides access to parks and links to neighborhood transit, and all of those criteria are met. It also, in the DDOT-led, recently released Move DC pedestrian element, identified 36th Street as a Tier 1 priority street. It also was identified in the Merch Safe Routes to School, and then recognized Marlene Berlin again. The Iona-sponsored sidewalk gap study identified 36th Street as lacking sufficient sidewalks. So there is so I'm not arguing in this resolution for a sidewalk on the length of 36th Street, and I think that creates a number of complications. Ideally, I think we'd all agree that we'd like to see a sidewalk on the length of 36th Street. I think at this time there's a number of issues that need to be addressed. One is the culvert down at the end of the street is to undergo some fairly serious renovation when the daylighting of the stream is completed. So in the meantime, the work that will occur is unlikely to extend that far, as far south on 36th as I'm proposing, so that right now this would be a sidewalk only on the stretch from Garrison to 36th, and that residents of visitors would benefit from from a safe sidewalk as a route to get to Connecticut. I understand that there's been some question about whether or not there'd be a cause for any serious landscaping or work that would need to be done. My understanding is that there would be enough, that the road is wide enough there that it could accommodate a sidewalk, but I would leave that as part of the study to DDOT to determine whether or not there's any concerns about the width of the street. I have to say I'm not entirely convinced that some of the businesses in the area would be completely supportive of this for a number of reasons, but I don't think those reasons outweigh the safety of pedestrians. So the other aspect in this is that I understand that the land abutting the street there on 36th is National Park Service land, but my understanding is that the DDOT setback would be sufficient, controlled area would be sufficient to build a sidewalk in that.
As right away.
In the right of way, sorry. Maybe that's the right phrase.
Is what you want.
So therefore, the therefore be it resolved clause says ANC 3F supports the construction of a sidewalk on the east side of 36th Street between Garrison Street and Feston Street Northwest, and asks that ANC 3F support be given great weight in DDOT decision-making regarding the sidewalk as established in DC Official Code Title 1, Section 309.10, Part D, 3A. And the other thing I would note is that there are no residents whose addresses face these this stretch of street. As my interpretation of or understanding of the law is that obviates the need for petition. So with that, I move to accept. I move to the adoption of the resolution.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Bob. Any discussion from commissioners?
I have one.
Yep.
On National Park Service, are you sure DDOT has a right to a setback? I don't think they do.
Yes,
Yeah, because they just
they
did
have
it
it in Wyndham
on.
Park.
Even on
Reno.
parkland?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Reno, they
Yes,
just did it
because-
on Malden.
Instead
Okay.
of
We have it
for
at
example.
Albemarle on 32nd Street.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure because
And it's
usually
a
they don't.
definite right away.
It varies, but it's basically 15 feet.
Did you change that?
Sure.
DOT right away set? I
Yes.
don't know if you want setback, but right away.
Sure.
It's parking space.
Anyone else?
But you don't
Yeah,
usually have that.
I've corresponded with Manoli on this. I have a picture on my phone of what that looks like. And I mean, I'm all for a sidewalk, but are you envisioning the sidewalk going where the cars are parked now, and then the cars would be parked closer to the center of the road?
Yes.
Okay, because you think the road is wide enough to accommodate that without having to dig into the hillside?
I do, but then again, I am not a sidewalk engineer, so I would defer to DDOT on those specifics.
But you, I mean, okay, I realize you're not an engineer, but you're not anticipating that parking spaces would be lost?
I would anticipate the parking spaces would still be would still exist. They would then be on the curb as opposed to up along the grass slope.
Okay.
My understanding is that again, albeit, I'll put on my casual sidewalk engineering hat that I do in my spare time. It appears that there's sufficient space, but again, I would believe that if it's deemed as that there wouldn't be, and that the road would be negatively impacted in some way, then I anticipate that they would not build it. Like that it would be too narrow if you build it, then I would anticipate that they wouldn't build it.
Can that be put in here?
I was just going to say
I
that
don't really
because.
want to.
Yeah,
I don't
but you
think
know
I
what,
really
my
want to.
concern is, if we don't put in something that we want to preserve the parking, they could build the sidewalk and take away the parking, because we haven't been clear.
Right.
Am I
And they will
correct?
do- They will do that.
And they will do that.
They will do that.
They don't care about parking, not in this day and age. And if we don't put something in here and they
Okay,
take
that's
away the
fine.
parking.
Yeah.
The park's there.
I mean,
Right.
in your statement, where is the sidewalk on the tower link or is hazardous due to the narrow width of the street? Well, you can interpret that.
Further, that's fair. That's further south. I would
So
strike
could
that.
we,
So
yeah,
let's,
could we strike that?
wait,
That's fair.
tell me what we're striking.
We're striking, whereas
The
the sidewalk on
whereas
the entire
clause.
width of 36 could be hazardous, because it is narrower
it's narrow beyond
And it's also
Pheasant.
eroded, and there's
Beyond
other
Garrison.
technical problems.
So we're striking that entire whereas clause.
Yes,
Which one, I'm sorry?
That's, no, the
Yeah.
intention is that it's narrow beyond Garrison.
right.
And then
It's
are
a
we
little
adding-
wider up where Garrison.
So you're taking out that whole whereas?
Yes.
And we're adding something to the effect of preserving parking.
I think we have to.
I really think you
Who
need to
parks there now?
throw this back at DDOT and.
Well, I'll tell you who uses the parking. It's obviously residents use the parking. I believe some of the businesses do as well for some of their work, but then also visitors to the commercial strip, primarily politics and
Politics
pros.
and pros, right. And some of their employees.
And residents also use it,
Sure. People with cars.
or people visiting people with cars.
People with cars that are visiting people.
But the parking is used, it's not that it goes unused.
But
It's also not
people are also gonna be
zoned
walking.
in any way. As far, if I'm not mistaken, it's not
Do
zoned.
you know how far the right-of-way goes into the hillside?
I do
Okay.
not.
Okay.
Maybe we should postpone this and look into those issues.
I don't think we need to.
Well, I'd like to know about the hillside. I'd like to know what the right-of-way is, whether it's 15 feet, 20 feet on the land.
Well,
Well, I
and
guess
and
we
wait a minute,
have
and the
a
fence here.
seconded motion, so we can
Wait a
vote
minute, and the
against it.
fence
if you
here,
want.
the Brandywine was done on a hillside, and they did carve that.
That's right.
They did do that. Now, we still have problems there with
I know we do.
erosion, but it can be done, and they will do it if it's feasible. They did not go into the street.
But I think we need
Just-
to
Oh,
be a little
I'm fine with
clearer.
adding a clause regarding preservation of parking spaces to the
Right.
extent possible.
With the
But-
appropriate setbacks at each corner, et cetera, because they don't really have that
I don't
now.
want to say to the extent possible, because that leaves it wide open to removing it. It's either they've got to preserve the parking. It's being used by people that go to politics and pros. I don't want to hurt businesses either, because not everybody that lives I know people that live in Foxhole and that live at the Colonnade and other ANCs do go to politics and pros. It's not always people who can walk.
I will accept preservation of parking to the extent possible as a friendly amendment. Anything else I would prefer to see voted on.
With what I have recorded, preservation of parking spaces with the appropriate setbacks to the extent possible.
Yes, appropriate setbacks.
Is that acceptable as a friendly amendment?
Yes.
Where are we putting that? In the clause
In the,
about
after the
deduct-
clause, after the whereas at the
one you took
bottom
out.
of the page.
Yeah.
Bottom of the first page.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anything else?
I'd like to see a vote on taking out the words to the extent possible,
Okay.
so that we preserve parking, period.
Is there a second for a motion to modify it?
I'll second.
Fine. All in favor of removing to the extent possible? Raise your hand.
If you're not voting for it, why did you second it?
Deserves a vote.
2, all opposed?
Three.
3, sorry, all opposed?
3.
3, abstaining.
So it fails.
So the motion doesn't carry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments on this resolution? Yes?
Marlene, why don't you just yell from back there?
You can just yell.
Okay. You know, one thought I had just, if there is a sidewalk that people are gonna cross more often at Garrison to get to the back of politics and pros. And that's just something, because you're creating a walkway there where there isn't, which means that people will use it in both directions, and that's just something.
You're raising it from a safety standpoint for pedestrians.
Yeah.
I think you make the argument that it's not going to make So people who are parking on Garrison are going to make that cross anyways. Now there's a safer route for them to get to the intersection to make the safe
No,
route.
I understand that, I just think there will be more numbers.
There will not be more numbers?
There will. I mean, you know, where I would not necessarily use that because it's so hard to walk on either side. You know, because I'll now cross there. Because, I'm just saying that that.
So more traffic going towards the neighborhood, away from the parking lot?
No, I'm talking about people walking on President. Now you have a crosswalk that will take you down a sidewalk that will take you down 36th Street.
Oh.
To the alley, and then more people will use the alley to access Politics and Pros, crossing at that location. I'm not saying that's a reason to not do this. I'm just saying that it creates more pedestrian traffic at that crossing. Because the west side
No, I
is such a
understand.
difficult place to walk.
Because it has bad roadways and no curb and gutter and
Yeah.
bad
Erosion
erosion,
and
which actually, if you're putting a sidewalk there, you really need to expand this into roadway improvements and ADA and crosswalk accessibility. Because they'll put the sidewalk in, as we know at Brandywine, and not put in the appropriate ADA crosswalk, ramp with crosswalk.
And
which
erosion
now-
control and
erosion
everything else.
control, which I am having the problem now on that particular street.
They just
Because they just put the sidewalk
Yeah,
in.
they just plopped it down.
I mean, that is an issue with DDOT.
Well, I don't know if they would assume that you put ramp because there's no sidewalk for people to go to. But I'm just saying.
They are supposed to.
Are they supposed to do it all over?
I don't know
They're,
if that would,
that's what
That's
Cesar
part of AGA.
Hurtado told me.
regardless of whether there's a sidewalk on the other side.
Yeah, people need to be able to get from the street or from wherever onto a sidewalk or whatever.
They're supposed to, but they're
Well,
not.
I just wanted just to, you know, that may come to roost, you know, down the line.
Should we,
Okay.
can I make a motion to table this resolution until why not?
Because we have a second motion.
That doesn't mean you
vote on.
can't table something.
Can't just make a motion to table.
I do support.
Motion to table.
Yes,
Well,
you
we
can.
want the sidewalk. Can we
Yeah.
add
look this
more,
up,
can
actually,
we
because I
add
was
something
curious.
about the
You can't just
roadway and
make a motion to
ADA?
table.
You have no ADA compliance.
You can table, you can make a motion to
Um,
table,
and
even after there's a
crosswalk
second.
markings?
I think that's okay.
Can we add something in there about, because I'm afraid they
I mean, I'm
won't
gonna vote
do
against
it
it, but I think it's
if
okay
you
to make a
don't
motion.
put it in there.
I mean,
At least we can come back and point and say, we asked for
I
it.
think this thing just needs further study. And to put in things like erosion control,
Yeah, we're just
ADA.
putting it in now. We'll just
Well,
add it.
Can I just say, philosophically, Sally and I have had this discussion, and philosophically, I can't figure out how to get things done on the ANC.
Yep.
Do you put together a half-baked, sorry Manoli, half-baked resolution to put in a sidewalk, which is missing a lot of what should be in there? Or do you meet with DDOT 5,000 times, you know, and send them, you know, 30 emails that they never respond to and phone calls they don't answer and so forth? I mean, how do you get DDOT to do anything in this city?
You know,
And I don't know. I don't know what to
Just
do.
for
You
what
wait
it's
for a
worth,
new mayor and a
Fence
new
wants to.
director.
Huh?
You wait for a new mayor and a new director.
You know, Mary Beth, I think if you have a good resolution, I mean, a concise one, and one that has everything in it, I think it helps to have that. To have what you called a half-baked one doesn't do any good. Because then they don't come back and refix the things that need to be fixed.
I got my no left
But,
turn done.
but I think it also
got,
helps to follow a resolution
They
through
actually
with
Got
the
it.
meeting.
No, they're putting it in.
Oh, that's good.
And I think we just, you know, these things end up in the queue. They only have so much money, and it's got to be spread out against all 8 wards that are requesting things also. So it kind of goes into,
I think I have
A
a motion
queue
to
and on,
reconsider
you know.
the Van Ness Vision Committee
What?
money.
okay, so here I researched.
Well, wait a minute.
I researched.
That wasn't answered. I mean, because it's,
I have I call for the question.
So
I think there's a motion to table.
you can technically have a motion. I guess I would say. So there has to be a second to that motion.
I'll second.
Okay. Then we vote. Just not debatable. All in favor of the motion to table, raise your hand and say aye.
I want to see a better resolution.
1. All opposed, raise your hand and say no. All right, everyone else.
All right, Manolo. if
Okay,
you're not
so
in
now
favor of something,
back-
Don't second it.
What? Okay, so back
So wait, so the motion to table has failed.
So we're back to
6-1.
Manoli's slightly revised resolution.
but he's gonna he's gonna add in more roadway, ADA compliance and crosswalks, et cetera,
Erosion.
and erosion control, plus maintenance.
I mean, I don't, you say it's half-baked, but I don't understand why a resolution in favor of, or supporting a sidewalk has to put in a statement in favor of erosion control. It seems.
Because we've got problems and we can't get it fixed.
But that's, that's not even fixing a symptom. I'm not even actually sure what that is. It has no relevancy. Like, you say, I'd like you were supporting something to be done, and, oh, by the way, we'd like it done correctly. I mean,
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
No.
Because they've done so much wrong.
That's not, you say half-baked, but I think that's unnecessary. It's unnecessary language to say, we'd like you to do something, and, oh, by the way, we'd like you to do it in a way that doesn't, damage anything.
Maybe because.
Perhaps we need to go back and revise every resolution we passed recently to include something like that. I don't, because when we passed a resolution recently on a sidewalk, I don't believe we included language on, like, don't screw it up.
Well, actually, we did ask for roadway improvements and ADA compliance.
But
We
that's
did
not-
last
it's
on the
different, but
32nd
that's
Street. We
different
did
than-
ask for that.
Yeah, but that's different than, like.
Oh, I'm just
We
asking you
didn't
to
even
add
move
that.
DC.
I'm fine with it.
So do you want to add this? Or
Yeah, fine. I'll add the ADA compliance and appropriate street markings. I'm a little bit unsure about I understand Marlene's point about the passage through there, that it may lead to more traffic going that direction and crossing over. We could, at that point, if that's happening, then that's a separate discussion about a sign to prohibit crossing at that location.
Well, no.
It's
but
to
then-
move people towards the
Yeah.
crosswalk, not away. But,
Well, then you're gonna get into-
everything has, I think the law of unintended consequences is there is always unintended consequences. There are always unintended consequences.
This is
so-
why you shouldn't ever do anything.
That's right.
Yeah, well, I guess we've
Move
come to
on.
the right place.
All right, so
Okay, so you're
we're
gonna
gonna
add-
call this for you're gonna add that phrase in there,
Yes.
and then let's vote on this. All in favor of this revised motion, raise your hand, say aye. 6 in favor, all opposed.
I'm abstaining.
Okay, all abstaining. Are you abstaining?
Yeah, I said I was.
No, it's a man motion. Fine.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said it to you.
All right, fine. 6-0-1.
So what we're gonna
Karen
do is
abstaining.
parking, and you're gonna-
All right, so to finish up the meeting, we got a couple miscellaneous things. First off, last meeting I said we would re-vote on the May minutes because there were a lot of questions of what the video showed and wording and stuff, but I think at this point it is correct.
No, it's not.
Not correct?
I did some research today,
did
and I went back and looked at the video of the May meeting. I didn't have time to finish the June one, video I'm talking about. And according to Robert's Rules of Order that I looked at, motions have to be verbatim. That's in Robert's Rules of Order. Along with, you can ask for roll call votes, you can table. In other words, I read the Robert's Rules today for the first time in ages, or looked at most of them.
Sure.
And what Adam said in the May meeting was that he be the authorized person to deal with whoever he has to get it fixed. At which point Mary Beth said she'd like to see him escalated, et cetera, et cetera. Then there's discussion of Gottlieb being somebody that should be talked to because he was the one who told us what it was. There was talk of the auditor, the attorney general, et cetera. Anyway, Manoli is the one, or Commissioner Priniatakis is the one who seconded that motion. And that's the motion we voted on. Wait a minute.
What motion?
Adam Whitmay's motion was to authorize him to deal with whoever whoever he has to deal with to get it fixed. Those were basically his words.
Okay, to deal with whoever he had, that's the phrasing you want.
No, I'm just saying that's what our motion was. Then in June,
So that's what it should say.
that's basically what it should say. But,
Not
in
basically,
no,
you
wait
said
a
it
minute,
has to
let
be
me,
the
That's what
let
you're
me.
saying, but there was a
can I-
lot of
let me
discussion
finish.
after
There
that.
was discussion, but you can put in there that there was discussion as to who we should talk to, but not as part of the motion.
No, there was discussion on how to word that.
No, there was no discussion in the video as to how to word the motion, and the motion was never restated. It never said auditor, it never said go to the Attorney General, it never said any of that. Now, if you let me just finish. In June, at our June meeting, when this discussion came up, Adam made another motion that we all voted on. That motion is not in the June minutes. And that's what I was trying to find tonight before I came here, because that would clarify it. And it's something we all voted on, and since there was a motion in June where Adam said what he would do, or made a motion and we all voted on it, that should be in the June minutes. And that might clear up the May minutes, because he made a motion to clarify the May minutes with a motion. Commissioner Summersgill, when do we have to have these minutes in on the quarterly report? Do we have time to go back and read the June minutes? June video?
Yes, June is fine, because that won't be till September.
Okay. Because Adam did
Okay.
make a motion that needs to be in our June minutes.
May will need by August, because we don't have the financial, the statement from the bank yet, so you can't do the previous quarter tonight.
I guess what I'm asking is, do we have time to, because Adam's
We
June.
had plenty of time for June.
Yeah, because Adam's
Okay.
June motion actually is a good motion, and we did vote on it, and it clarifies the May minutes as to what was actually, what we.
So we'll deal with June next month, but for the May, as Malachy has circulated and drafted, does
not
anyone
accurate.
else? Okay.
Well, I have a question then. So the motion was for you to escalate it to something.
Not to escalate it. That was a word Mary Beth said, was that she would like to see him escalated.
So it was to do something.
Adam basically said, and this is his words, that he be the authorized person to deal with whoever he has to deal with to get it fixed.
So the motion was not to do anything. It was just that.
No, he said he was
Chair-
going to deal with whoever he had to get it fixed.
No,
And we-
but you said the motion is to authorize him to deal with whoever he has to deal with. So it's not actually authorize it. It was not actually to have him do anything. It was just to authorize him to be
No, he
able
said
to
he'd
do
be
something.
that he would be the authorized person that he would be the authorized person to deal with whoever he has to get it fixed. Though those were his words, and you seconded it.
Yeah, so I seconded him. The motion I seconded was to authorize him to be the person. So I'm just saying
No,
he's
to
not
deal
in
with. It
contempt.
says to deal with whoever he has to.
I mean, I think
I think you're.
I'm
it's a question of
comfortable with what Malachy's written in here.
My question though is, did you do anything?
That's a whole nother
Not
issue.
much yet.
So that's why I'm
need
questioning.
that
The reason I'm
versus
asking is
giving
because you're
other
not in any sort
grants.
of like contempt of the commission then by not actually acting, because
We only
all we approved was
authorize him
authorize
There's any
him
contempt.
to act.
No, we
Not
There,
to.
but anyway.
We authorized him to deal with
If
whoever
there's
he had
contempt, it's
to.
going the other way.
Is there a motion on the table?
So
See,
okay,
no,
so
the motion in the minutes says that he'll go to the auditor and the attorney general.
Okay.
That was not the motion.
okay.
And they have to be
I really
exact according to
appreciate that. I
what.
guess
And your June motion would clarify the main
that's
minutes, and it's a
fine,
good
but
one
that
if
would
you
be
just
in
look it up.
June. Okay, we'll look it up. So, because
And
we'll
maybe
vote
that's
on
what-
June next month. So I guess May here, Malachy, are you interested in modifying this to what Karen's saying, or are you comfortable with the minutes as is?
I'm comfortable with the minutes as is.
Okay.
If the commission feels that they're not accurate and they need to be
They can
revised, I'm more
vote
than
against
happy
it.
as secretary to go back and revise them. What I would like to do, is there a motion on the table to approve the May minutes?
Approve the minutes. Yeah.
Okay, so if that motion does not carry, then I will go back and I will revise.
Even though the Robert's Rules of Order says that the motion has to be verbatim.
Motion
Well,
to
if that's
suspend
the-
the rules.
If that's the case, then we have to be much more
We do. I'm not saying we
deliberate
don't.
about who's speaking when. We can't all speak over each other.
I
Everybody has to
totally-
be
I-
recognized.
I totally agree, and if you look at the
But
cheat
let me
sheet-
finish then.
Okay.
Everybody has to be recognized, and I have to keep very careful records of everything that's said verbatim,
What the-
as opposed to capturing the sentiment that I think.
I think we have to start going by Robert's Rules of Order in some cases, but I think what the Robert's Rules of Order, those cheat sheets that go along with it, that clarify, that explain what Robert's Rules of Order does, whatever, they all say that when a motion is made, if the commissioner has it in writing, it should be submitted. If it's just one of the verbal ones, that the chair should repeat it before we take a vote or whatever. That's in there. But I think minutes have to be accurate.
So does that mean
What
all
I'm
our
saying-
minutes?
well, there's a difference
that
be-
Bill,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Sal.
that David Lowell did? I mean, he didn't do them that
I
way either.
can't say what David Lowell
I
did
mean,
and go
sorry,
back to what
but-
David Lowell. You know, you're going to David Lowell. I don't have David Lowell's minutes in front of me.
By the way, he was
I don't
trying
know
to get
that they
married.
weren't accurate.
Yeah.
I don't know that his
right,
motions
so
weren't
anyway,
accurate
so-
in his minutes.
But there's
Because
a
you weren't on the
critical
commission then, were you?
question
Well, I don't know if they were accurate.
Matters, whatever you voted says.
Right, and I think I accurately captured what you were saying, even if I didn't capture the
fine with
words
that.
verbatim. So I think there's a distinction here between accurate and verbatim.
Well,
Okay,
the
so,
rules say verbatim.
well, the
You're saying
DC
accurate.
code just says.
No, the
and I
rules say
think
verbatim.
This isn't a transcript, though. It's
Okay,
not-
guys,
It says in
is there a
minutes, not in a
second for the
transcript.
minute, motion,
It
my
says
motion
minutes.
to approve the May minutes? Is there a second?
Yes. I
Thank
second.
you. All in favor as circulated on the internet and here if you want to read it for Malachi's May minutes, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
This is the.
5,
Yes.
all opposed.
And I want to show that I'm not voting
Sorry,
against
was
it,
there
and for the reason.
6?
Yes.
And all right, so 6 in favor, 1 opposed. Karen. Okay.
Adam,
So
can-
June-
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
Are you planning on going to the auditor and
It's
the
some,
office?
yeah, I need to draft an email. I need to look at it, but I think at this point, I actually don't know that I actually need to. I think there is a legal distinction between the different writings, and I need to piece it together to figure out what the difference is. And I think their input sort of on this Northwest Neighbors most recently sort of explains the distinction they're looking for, and it's not black and white, but it's basically they don't care if it's operational.
No, they don't.
All they care about is that there's a public purpose. So as long as we just ram that on and keep going, public purposes, it's probably adequate.
Okay,
And
great.
I guess in every grant we give, there's a risk they say no, and we could fight it like 3C did, and the court or auditor or whoever will find a public purpose,
Can
and
you
that's
send
good
me
enough.
that, because I couldn't find it
Yeah,
anymore.
I can send it to you. So I don't know that I actually need to go to anyone, because I don't know that I want to actually see what they want to say.
Well, I think you're going to get something different from the auditor. and
Yeah, I don't know. I need to go
General
through it more.
counsel.
So June meeting minutes we'll do next month. Lastly, Bob, would you have a financial update at all?
No, because I haven't gotten the
Good enough.
bank statement.
Bob, do we need an
We-
August meeting from your perspective?
Yes, from my perspective, we do.
Okay.
I'll be out of town.
Will we have a quorum on August, just so I know? It would be August 19th, so I'll be here. Bob will be here. Manoli.
August 19th.
19th. All right, so it sounds like we could have a meeting. So, okay, we'll have a meeting, which will probably be very short, on August 19th.
Short is good.
August 19th. So I'll make a motion to adjourn. All in favor of adjourning? All right. 9:27.
Any update on the website?
I need to spend time. I'm going to set aside a whole day to fix a lot of it.